Let us start this video, let us do some more. In the 5th book, Professor Trelawney makes less predictions than she did beforehand. This is probably mostly to do with Umbridge, but let's start with her first prediction, which is actually towards Umbridge. She asks her to predict something for her, and she says, I'm afraid that you are in grave danger." And Professor Umbridge doesn't believe her. She thinks she's just making it up, but she was absolutely in grave danger because she was basically turning the whole school against her, which would lead to the centaur fiasco. After that, Trelawney is a bit unnerved and she swoops down on Harry and Ron and starts interpreting Harry's dream diary. And by the time she had interpreted Harry's dreams at the top of her voice, all of which, even the ones that involved eating porridge, apparently foretold a gruesome and early death, which is just a death thing again, with which she is actually quite accurate. The next prediction, if you can call it that we hear about from Trelawney is mentioned by Parvati. So Hagrid is holding his first Care of Magical Creatures class for the year, and he shows the class Thestrals, and Parvati says, but they're really, really unlucky. They're supposed to bring all sorts of horrible misfortune on people who see them. Professor Trelawney told me once. And it sounds like Professor Trelawney believes that Thestrals bring misfortune. And this is one of those things that really, really don't seem to be true, because Harry has seen the Thestrals many, many times. If you just look at that lesson, then it does seem to have been quite unlucky, because a short while after Parvati says that, Umbridge appears to inspect the lesson. The next time we see the Thestrals is when Harry and his friends fly to the Ministry on them, which was a very unlucky outing as it ended with the death of Sirius. But then we also see the Thestrals at the beginning of every school year. Although, to be fair, up from the 5th year, pretty much every school year did bring bad luck and misfortune. So I don't know how to feel about this. We could say that this is just one of those things that people believe in, such as the Grim bringing bad luck. We don't know what exactly Professor Trelawney told Parvati. Maybe Parvati is over-exaggerating. Or maybe Thestrals did indeed bring people bad luck. The next prediction that we hear is when Harry did his interview with Rita Skeeter, and it was published in the Quibbler, and a lot of teachers respond by giving him house points. Professor Flitwick passes him a box of squeaking sugar mice, and Professor Trelawney breaks into hysterical sobs during divination and announces to the startled class and a very disapproving Umbridge that Harry's not going to suffer an early death after all, but will live to a ripe old age, become Minister for Magic, and have 12 children. Right, so there are lots of ways in which this could be taken. My own personal interpretation is that I believe that Harry was going to die, but after he did the interview something changed, and up from then everything that we know in the storyline happens. He doesn't die, it's just a little bit of Voldemort that dies. Harry does live on to a happy age. That's just my little interpretation, mostly going by the fact that up from this passage, Professor Trelawney never mentions Harry's death, Harry dying ever again. at least not in the books. So that's my own interpretation. Most people would say that either Trelawney is trying to show her admiration for Harry, having done the interview, by predicting really nice things about him in front of Umbridge, and that it's not a proper prediction, it's just made up. Other people might say that, okay, well, this does also fit into the theory that part of Harry died. Harry didn't actually die, as we know from the books, so the kind of duality of Trelawney predicting Harry's death, but on this occasion saying that he will live to a ripe old age, does make sense with what we know from the books, because part of him dies, he kind of dies, and the rest of him, the main part of him, does live on to a ripe old age, because as far as we know he does seem to be very much alive for a long time, from what J.K. Rowling has been telling us. The strange thing about this is that a lot of these things are disproved, or at least seem quite unlikely, after the events of The Cursed Child. First of all, in The Cursed Child, Hermione is Minister for Magic and not Harry, but you could argue that maybe Harry becomes Minister of Magic after her. We don't know. The very unlikely thing are the 12 children, seeing as in The Cursed Child Harry's already relatively old. He has 3 children and he doesn't seem to want any more kids. To be fair, if you want to accept The Cursed Child as canon, you could say we don't know what happens afterwards. Wizards live for quite a long time. Maybe all of these things come true. Or like me personally, you'd say, well, The Cursed Child isn't even written by J.K. Rowling, I don't think that is canon. So it's your own decision, but basically either way, you could, number one, say I don't think the events in The Cursed Child are true, I think this is what happened. Or you can say I think the things in The Cursed Child are true and these things did happen afterwards. Or you could say that I think the events in The Cursed Child are true and this paragraph was just an example of Professor Trelawney showing her admiration for Harry during the interview by making up the best things she could think of in front of Umbridge. So I don't think that this passage shows that Professor Trelawney is a fraud at all, because even if it doesn't come true, the whole atmosphere in the passage is about teachers trying to show Harry that they are proud of him for having done the interview, and I think maybe Trelawney just did that. And the last mention we have of Sybill Trelawney in this book is when Dumbledore shows Harry the prophecy that she made about him, and you know who. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him. Apparently James and Lily did that. Born as the 7th month dies at the end of July. Fine. And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. He did with the scar. But he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. According to Dumbledore, this was love. A lot of people have had various interpretations of what this power was. But he certainly had some kinds of powers that, you know, he didn't. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. Okay, this is going to be a little complicated, so bear with me. First of all, here is the way that you can take the prophecy, which makes sense with what happened in the books, and makes sense with the way that the prophecy is worded. One thing that we do need to do is to take neither to mean both Harry and Voldemort. So it says, for neither can live while the other survives, which I think can be taken in 2 ways. First one being that Harry and Voldemort have to die for Harry to survive, and Harry and Voldemort have to die for Voldemort to survive. A lot of people have taken it to mean for Harry can't live while Voldemort survives, and Voldemort can't live while Harry survives. But we are going with the former explanation now. So if you look at what happened in the books, Voldemort died at the hands of Harry. We could debate over whether it was actually Harry who killed him with his spell, because actually it was Voldemort's spell which kind of backfired because of the Elder Wands, but he definitely died at the hands of Harry. And Harry survived, and for that to happen they both had to die. Voldemort died, Harry basically died in that he went to the Afterworld's place at King's Cross. In an alternate reality, assuming that somehow Voldemort had survived, then this prophecy tells us that for that to have happened, Harry would have had to die at his hands, and both Harry and Voldemort would have had to be killed, which makes sense. He would have had to kill himself to kill Harry, because in the fourth book he took Harry's blood to create his new body, and that meant that Harry was always tethered to life. So for him to truly be killed, Voldemort himself, or at least some form of the body that he had at the moment, would have had to be killed. So that's one way in which you could take the prophecy, and in that way it makes sense with the books and you don't have to change the wording, and Trelawney was correct. If you take the word neither to mean Harry couldn't live while Voldemort survived, and Voldemort couldn't live while Harry survived, there could be two explanations for this. The first one makes sense, but I don't think it's very satisfying, and that would just be that Harry couldn't survive because Voldemort would always be trying to kill him, and Voldemort couldn't survive because Harry would always be out to kill him. In another interpretation, you would have to change the wording. Some people were expecting the prophecy to directly explain about the fact that part of Voldemort's soul is in Harry, and the fact that Harry's blood is in Voldemort and that they're tethered to one another. But in that case the wording is wrong, because it would have to be for neither can die while the other survives. But then that would make sense as well. So the prophecy is very confusing and strange, just like prophecies in mythology always are, I suppose. But there is no doubt that with it, Professor Trelawney made a genuine prediction. So that was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I hope you liked this video, I hope you maybe thought it was interesting, and I hope you'll be back next week where we'll be discussing all of Trelawney's predictions in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince.